So the point of today's meeting is just to introduce you to the product that we've created to attack the OTT space. But more importantly, I think it's also to answer your questions and kind of address some of the opaqueness about that space. One thing that I've learned, and I've been deep in the weeds of this type of product and this type of technology for a long time, is that there's a lot of snake oil out there. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of very foggy definitions around what is what in this space. So the point of today is really just to help clarify some of that. So when you're prepared to enter into it, to understand a little better, to buy it, and some of you maybe already are or already have, just to clarify some of what our capabilities are and then what the limitations and what the deliverables are across the industry. To give you just a quick background on me, so I started in the agency side. Years ago, I actually ran an agency. And then Hearst took me, from that agency because I wouldn't buy anything from them, so they wanted somebody who could figure out how to, create some things that would sell. So I jumped into Hearst as a product marketing lead for a few years, and then I got a little brave and raised some venture capital and started my own tech company. So over the past few years, I've gone through 2 acquisitions. I've run the gamut on the ad tech side as a vice president for a big ad tech company for the last 3 years. And then oversaw the integration of those software companies that bought us until coming back to Hearst in early February. So when I get back to Hearst, the biggest thing that they said is, we really need to double down and focus in on our ad product set. We really want to make sure that we are best in class across the spectrum. And we recognize wholeheartedly that there's a huge opportunity outside of our traditional linear broadcast channels to just be better at video. And that's a huge takeaway for a company like Hearst, because if you think about who we are and what our identity is we are television, right? We are video. When you take the combined eyeballs that we have just across our local news and weather, across our footprint, we are as big as YouTube. We are a massive video company. We have a huge audience, a huge national footprint. And when you extend just outside of Hearst Television on its own, you're talking about a huge cable footprint. We own A&E Networks, Lifetime, History Channel, Viceland. We have a large footprint in the video space and a huge opportunity to leverage that in a more meaningful way for our clients. So the first charge I got when I came back was, hey, we're behind on the OTT front. We need to have a product that we can get to market, but we want to do it in a really smart way. Now, one of the things that I love and sometimes rub up against at Hearst is that their methodology often goes completely against my instincts. So Hearst is a company that's been around for 131 years. They are still privately owned. We're one of the largest privately owned companies in the world. They've done that by being very thoughtful, very methodical, and creating products that last over time. As a result, you'll hear things from leadership at Hearst that often goes along the lines of, we're fine not being first to market. We'll be a fast follower, let them screw up before we do. And that's a really interesting thing to say to a guy who's used to starting companies, because you're sitting there in the tech world and you're going, run as fast as you can, make sure you're first to market because you need a first mover advantage, right? So it's a little bit counterintuitive for me. The reason that I think that has been incredibly helpful across the board for me, but also for our company and for this product in particular, is that we did let a couple of years of people screwing up teach us a whole hell of a lot. And as a result, I think we built a really good product. So what I'm going to show you today is really that. It's a headline version of that product. I'll probably get in the weeds a little bit because folks like you, the challenge that you're going to bump into as both advertisers and agencies is you kind of reselling this product internally, right? So you have to understand the ins and outs of how it works. And the funny thing is it will either be the easiest or the hardest pitch of your life. That's kind of what I've looked at with this product. It's very binary. You either have, this is premium television just on a new format to a new audience, and it's TV, and that's a pretty straightforward sell. Or it's you get someone in the room who understands DSPs, you get someone in the room who understands how technologies link up to each other, and it becomes, well, what happens when my daughter logs into her Apple TV using my cable login to stream A&E channel? Who is that? Who gets that inventory? Who's that audience targeted? So it can get really convoluted really quick. So we'll talk about a lot of that today. The biggest thing that I want to share with you are kind of the guiding principles of what I thought about while we were building this product, because there's really 2 things that we cared most about and 2 big problems that we're solving. The first is quality inventory. Our focus is 100% on having the best quality OTT inventory in the space, period. The challenge with that is scale. As soon as you limit yourself in the type of content you access and the type of screens you're going to access, then you limit your scale. So the second was, how do we create the most local scale using quality inventory? So those are the two guiding principles that we focused on with this product, and I believe we've accomplished that. The guiding principle on the sales side that we focused on is just straight up integrity and transparency. What we've seen and what I've seen through several months sampling other products, working with leaders of other products, looking at reporting from actual campaigns from both ours and from competitive products, is that there is a huge lack of transparency. And the most common statement I get from folks who have bought OTT in the space so far has been, I don't really understand what I got. I don't understand what I bought. So it's a matter of matching KPIs with the type of product that we're building and showcasing how we delivered on that. So, we'll kind of breeze through this presentation a little bit here. This is a slide that everybody will easily understand, but the headline here is, it used to be easy. It used to be so nice, didn't it? When all you cared about was, one screen, 4 networks, time programming, targeting, and the only deliverable we had to give back to you was, hey, we gave you what you bought. It was the impression base. Let's go back to sipping whiskey and talking about taglines by the water cooler. Those days are done, right? That kind of advertising has changed, and the problem or the opportunity here, right, is this is what it looks like now, where every screen, every content channel, every consumer is fragmented in one way or another across the ecosystem. What that means for us as a content company too is the second rail here is, I don't want GRPs and just a basic audience. What I want is this human being at this time who's looking to buy my product right now. And that puts a huge demand on how do we organize data? How do we create a product that can do that effectively? And then the third part of that is, what are you getting back? If I just come back to you and you bought 1 million commercials over the course of a month and I said, here, you got your 1 million commercials, with a product like this, you're gonna look at me and say, okay, what did I really get? Who did I touch? What content was I on? What type of deliverables did I get? What was my video completion rate? And then you're gonna ask me for attribution. And the problem with that is that, as you know, in the digital space, we've set the bar way too high, way too soon. We figured out we can measure something called clicks, 20, 30 years ago, and then we really shot ourselves in the foot and said, measure everything you do by clicks, because that's all that matters. When in reality, as marketers, we recognize that it takes a really robust set of puzzle pieces to get to the outcome you're after. So this is a component of that puzzle piece, right? But it's a good component for us. It's just changed the way we have to buy. It's changed the way we have to think about building products, because it's not easy anymore. It's very convoluted. One important component of this space is defining it. It's amazing. This is one of the products that it seems so damn simple. Like, it seems like it's just TV, premium TV on a streaming content channel. The thing is, everybody has defined OTT in a slightly different way, especially when they're selling it. And that's been the big thing, that's the big challenge that you guys have, is that when you're trying to buy in this space, what you are gonna bump up against is definitions that are very loose, very gray. And they do that specifically because that gives you, as the seller of this product, the most flexibility to get inventory in different channels. So the way, I'll tell you the way we define it and then what I see a lot in the marketplace. So the way that Hearst is defining over-the-top technology, over-the-top content, is premium full episode player content, period. That's 30 to 60 minute primetime quality television. We're talking about real programming. We're talking about the person sitting down to stream Grey's Anatomy or This Is Us. It's that type of programming where we're really focused in heavily on that type of audience who's sitting down, and as a result, that skews heavily to a connected TV. So that's the other distinction. A lot of people think about streaming OTT and they think, well, this is a great opportunity to hit people who are watching on their laptop and their mobile device. That is true. However, the consumption trend for quality content like this is heavily connected TV. It's a TV experience. About 85% of the inventory that we deliver goes to a connected TV. So the reality of the space has changed a little bit. So the reason that this is so important to understand is that a lot of what's out there and being called OTT is just straight up long form online video. I've looked at reporting that has boggled my mind at times when I'm like, why did 10%, I'll use this example. So one report I looked at not too long ago showed about 10% of the campaign delivering on theblaze.com. Now, The Blaze is a politically charged website. So right there alone, it's kind of a red flag when you're doing audience extension products, because your advertisers typically want to be careful about that stuff, right? And then I went, wait, do they have like a TV channel? They probably do. But it wasn't that. What it was longer form snippets of user generated, by user generated, it was usually like somebody that worked for them, but quick self-made video that was 10 to 15 minutes long. But because it was a little bit longer, they were setting an ad in the middle of it and calling that OTT. That's not what we do. I just want to be really clear about that. In fact, a very small amount of our inventory is even kind of web-based. Most of it is app-based. Most of it is streaming through the Roku channels. The actual, someone sitting in front and logging into some type of, content system on their TV rather than just going to a website. We do access some of that website content as well, but this is where the waters get really muddy. And the reason that the waters get muddy is one that I understand. Again, I've been building this product for a while. So when you look at how you have to go to market from a pricing and from a kind of fragmentation perspective, it's really easy to lower your bar. It's really easy to say, well, I want to, my client can only spend a $25 CPM. I have to figure out how to get there. It's really easy to say they want a little more on mobile devices. I got to figure out how to get there. The reason that's a challenge is because OTT inventory is expensive, especially when you're talking about the type of OTT content as we've defined it. The easiest way to dilute that is to go find online video inventory that would be available through like a normal online exchange and package it into this type of product. The problem you get when that happens is you're paying 3 times the price of inventory that you could get in another channel. So this is why that distinction to me is so important, because we don't want to screw you. If you can get pre-roll inventory on quality content at a $15 CPM, that's what you should get. But that's not OTT. We're drawing the line there because those different classifications of inventory shouldn't be used to dilute or bring up one another. What they should be used is for specific purposes, because a lot of that pre-roll inventory is also clickable and that type of call to action, whereas a lot of OTT inventory is not. It's commercial inventory. It's stuff that's streaming on a TV. It's not that type of interactive format. It's more of a consumption format, which is why we focus on a KPI like a completion rate, because we care most about consumption when you're talking about video products. So I'm sure you know quite a bit about the space by now, but just to kind of tell you why things are the way they are and why we're actually able to build a product focused on that level of quality content. So connected TVs have essentially hit scale now. I mean, that's the biggest takeaway. We're at a point of saturation where there's about 200 million streaming television experiences happening in the United States. The one important stat about this is that it's ubiquitous across demo. So whether you're a low-income household or a high-income household, you have a connected TV. The TVs that are coming off the assembly line now, pretty much all of them have an operating system on them that allows you to stream content. And that's actually been a huge shift for companies that, for example, we invest in. We're an investor in Roku. We invested quite a bit of money in them years ago, which gives us a unique relationship there that I'll talk about in a minute. But Roku used to be known for making hardware, the stick that plugs into the side of the TV. Now they're known for making operating systems. You get the TV and it's already got Roku on it. It's a software. So that shift has pretty much democratized that experience across every TV type. Streaming content is cheaper than cable packages. But it doesn't scale that way across necessarily income bracket. It just means that we're accessing the full spectrum of people who are consuming premium content. One of the fun trends that I point to when I give these talks is, what we typically see is the younger audience using their parents' cable logins to access content, and their parents using their kids' Netflix logins to access content. So it's a flip of, I get the $9.99 subscription, here's my login, and you get the $300 bill every month, here's your login. But that poses some really interesting challenges too when you're talking about targeting this content, right? Because you get different logins from different people. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute because we've solved for a lot of that stuff. But it's a fascinating experience because you now have, that's a great example of just the type of fragmentation we have, right? It's very confusing because everybody's accessing the content. So millennials, the trick today is not, everyone used to say OTT is the only way to reach millennials. It's not the only way, but the reason that that's so important is because millennials are far more likely to be a cord cutter, whereas a 55 plus demo is still streaming content. We're seeing it pretty much ubiquitously happening. The only difference is they also have a cable package. So there's a different audience, a duplicative and non-duplicative audience that we can learn how to hit. So the interesting thing about that is when you're talking about the consumption trends themselves, we're now at a place where 78% of households in the country have some type of streaming service. 63% have more than one. So we're not talking about just one behemoth in this space. That's an important thing to kind of recognize, is that People have a lot of different streaming services. They're accessing content in a lot of different ways. And the majority of households doing this also have a cable package, also watch broadcast television. So it's a, it's a fragmented experience with how the data works. And that's a huge focal point of me as somebody who's managing this, for our company, because I look at over-the-top television as a critical stepping stone to the next iteration of what TV is. And what I mean by that is you have your linear broadcast, right? That's what you guys have been buying for many, many years. You know the audience, you trust KCCI here, for example, and you buy that audience, you buy that type of programming. This is a next step out into audience-targeted versions of that. Cable's like that, right? Where you're making a more audience-targeted buy. The difference is the technology and the experience is a little different here. We can control, messaging a little differently here. But all of this comes together for a point of conversion where things like addressable TV are a real thing in the next 3 to 5 years, where we actually have set-top box data and this type of data speaking to one another to target an audience across every screen. And for us, that's a critical thing because we are a TV video company. So when you look at Hearst and you say, what do we do? Well, we do quality video programming, quality video advertising. We want to be able to do that on the big 3 pillars that are going to hold your campaigns up over the next decade plus, which is great broadcast, OTT extension, great addressable TV, and have all of those data sources talking to one another to make sure you're hitting your audience the right way and doing it effectively. So that's why this is an awesome tipping point for us, and it's a fun point for me too, because you get to figure out some of these hard problems and how to make that work. The way the consumption's happening too, like I said, it's going to connected TV. US adults are watching about 15 hours of OTT content a week. So you're, again, skewed towards, the connected TV with about 8 hours of that being on a big screen. But the thing that gets us excited, again, is 28 hours of that is still happening on linear. So when you think about the amount of consumption taking place in the average American household, it's extreme. I still I look at that sometimes, it's like, do I watch that much TV? And it's a lot, there's a lot of TV consumption happening. The exciting thing is we're touching that at every point of the consumer journey. The hard thing about that for us, and probably more for you sometimes, is that this is the reality of the space, where the fragmentation in how you are consuming that content is extreme. You can log into individual apps and websites. You can log into different platforms like Netflix and Roku and Hulu. You can dive into certain platforms or cable packages like DirecTV Now, who also have streaming services. There's a million different ways that you can access content, and you can strip it down to your specific needs. So as you create these skinny bundle cable packages, as you add on your OTT subscriptions, you're looking at a space that is just all over the map, and it's hard to make sense of. One of the critical components of that is how do you reach an audience that's consuming that way, right? So as an advertiser, the biggest challenge I think a lot of you have, and a lot of what I had when I had to face up how to build this thing, is you look at the space and you go, well, how do I achieve, again, quality content, quality scale? And then you meet everybody. And that's what I did. I met with all of our platforms. We had all of the major, I had the CEOs of all the major OTT resellers who already exist come in my office. I had all of the platforms and DSPs offer me proposals, and then I went down and met with all the content companies as well. So it was a very busy time, but it was a very exciting time because you're also learning a ton about how everybody's operating. And one of the key things, that you kind of come together on here is that independently, these things don't have the scale to work for you. So you have to come up with a really creative way to get the content you need at scale. For example, Roku is a company we invest in, very close relationship with them. They do a fantastic job, great product, great content. They have a good national footprint. So they have a national sales team that does what Hulu does and kind of goes out and tries to sell their upfronts and sell national scale. But then go to Hulu and I ask them, say, okay, not Hulu, but Hulu's in the same type of example. But then go to Roku and say, well, what type of footprint do you have in Des Moines? What type of footprint do you have in Omaha? What is my DMA's penetration? And the numbers go down real quick. It might be meaningful. You might still have tens of thousands of people streaming on those services. But as soon as you start to try to audience target that a little bit, you lose your scale and ability to control frequency. So this is why sometimes when you're streaming and you're watching a certain channel, you'll see the same advertiser every pod. That's a problem. The reason that happens, however, is because whoever sold that said, we need to hit an impression goal. I'm not saying it's a unique impression goal. We just need to hit an impression goal. So we're going to serve this ad to the same human being a million times. And that can backfire on a brand. We didn't want to have that. We wanted to have enough scale where we could make that fly. And how advertising works in this space is kind of an interesting thing. And it presents an interesting business challenge. because the pipes for a product like this are programmatic. So the manner by which the ad gets on the screen is programmatic, but the manner by which that ad is sold is not. So there's a big distinction that's a departure from traditional programmatic advertising. So what I mean when I say that is 5 seconds before the ad is showing up in that program you're watching, we're making the decision to serve it. We don't know before that. So we're following how long you've been watching the TV. Do you meet the pricing criteria for that inventory? Do you meet the demographic criteria for that inventory and the content criteria? If all those things align, you get that ad. This presents an interesting thing for some advertisers because they're used to buying TV going, give me my schedule, know when I'm trafficked, I match that up with my analytics, I can see spikes in traffic to my website, I can see spikes in traffic and performance. You can't really do that well with this product because we may very well be serving the ideal consuming experience on the content you want to the person you want at 4 a.m. rather than 8 p.m. because they couldn't sleep and they decided to watch Grey's Anatomy and get caught up early. Or the baby's crying and they just, it's that kind of thing where you're streaming on demand in such a way where we're not focused on a trafficking schedule so much as we're focused on reaching the audience you gave us at scale. The only way to do that is with good programmatic pipes. So we need to make sure that we can deliver well using technology. The departure from traditional programmatic buys, which I'm actually seeing display and video start to kind of go back to this a little bit because content is finally coming back into the, the brains of advertisers a little more than it was a few years ago, is everything has to be purchased directly. So it's a weird dynamic where you are essentially setting up using leverage to try to create direct deals with all of those crazy content companies I had on the screen before. So the BD effort is significant. We have 3,000 private marketplace deals in this product. We also have direct deals where we go in and we negotiate one-on-one with content companies to make sure that we can get their inventory at scale in one of a couple ways. One way is a preferred price because we're Hearst and we're big and we have leverage. Another is buying inventory up front, making sure that we have troves of inventory that we own that no one else can access. That allows us to give you better stuff at a better price. It also allows us to use data better. And I'll talk about that in 1 second. So in terms of the product itself, there's a few key talking points here and kind of a few key value props that I'll point to. So the first is what you've heard me say already, which is we kind of make sense of that crazy scheme of all of the different content providers. The second thing that we do really well, though, is we guarantee scale. We guarantee delivery. So that's a little bit unique. So if you come to me and you say, I want 1 million impressions next week in my market served to premium content, we're one of the few that will say, sure, you got it. And the reason we're able to do that is because we're Hearst. So we own a lot of content. So we have our news and weather, we have our broadcast network. We also own A&E networks. So we own History, we own Lifetime, Lifetime Movie Network, Viceland, all these premium streaming programs that give us a unique opportunity to access content in a unique way. Now, a rule of thumb in this space is the closer you are to the content, the better your product's going to be, from a pricing perspective typically, and from a performance perspective. The reason for that is, think about it, like A&E is a Hearst company, right? So A&E has its own business unit, its own sellers. They're going out and selling the content they're producing. Very little overhead in terms of a sales team, right? They're covering their costs on production and all that, but at the end of the day, it's their inventory they're selling. They broadcast a lot of that on Roku. So Roku takes a small percentage of that inventory as well as part of their deal, and then they have a team that goes and resells that. They have to take into account the licensing fees. They have to take into account additional costs. So their CPM's a little higher. And then Roku and A&E, if they don't sell that stuff, then it goes into maybe an exchange or another direct deal. Now you're accounting for new technology fees. So the price, as you know, as you get taxed along the way, right, it kind of continues to go up. So the closer you are to the content, typically the better you can do, which is why we value our relationship specifically with Hearst and Roku, because we own those companies, because we're tight with those companies, we have the ability to get their content and get their inventory at a much better price. We also, and this is a real important factor, have better insight into the data. So instead of just kind of making best guesses, we have a lot of first-party information that we can leverage in order to target. So we have more accurate targeting, better frequency, better pacing, and better access to quality inventory. From a strategic perspective, does that mean that we are the exclusive seller of A&E? No. You're going to go out and hear pitches for OTT, and every time someone gets the inventory slides, A&E will be the first company you see because it's alphabetical. And the truth about the matter is, if we sell all of it and A&E sells all of it, then they don't have any left. So we get first look at it, better pricing, all that. But there's still times when some of that inventory makes its way to SpotX and some of their DSPs that they can, leverage that inventory. My goal with this product, just so you know where our roadmap is to make sure that that does not happen going into next year. My goal is to build a product that scales up and gets strong enough where I go and meet with the heads of A&E and say, here's a bunch of money, give me all that inventory, and we're just going to silo it off for ourselves because we know we can sell it. Like any new product, we want to get scale, but the teams here at our local markets especially are the ones out here who are going to make that possible because we're showcasing this product around the country. As we build, we have better access, which is a good thing for you because that gives you the opportunity to leverage that inventory in an even more intimate way and in an even more direct way and better pricing. So, our focus on those relationships has been key to building this product because I think the future of streaming is kind of an interesting one. We don't know yet what the consumer experience is necessarily going to be in a few years. Why can't content companies go direct to consumer more often, right? There's business reasons. Like you think about the NFL, they're probably a good example. They have the scale, the brand recognition, and the tools to build direct to consumer. So why don't we have the NFL network directly on, you're streaming your game right through them? Well, the answer really is the licensing and content fees that they get from the major networks are so important to their business and they're so huge that they're probably not going to give that up, right? So that there's still going to be some diversification in how the content gets out there. But it is a very interesting question that we ask a lot. And we play an interesting strategic role in this ecosystem because as Hearst, we are the local affiliate of major networks like ABC, NBC, CBS. Because of that, we have very unique relationships that they covet because we're the local broadcast news source. We're the trusted brand in the local market. What they get from us is so valuable. And because we're Hearst, we're in a little bit of a unique spot because we work with all of them. So we're a bigger ABC O&O than ABC. So we operate more ABC TV stations than they do. So we have very important strategic relationships with these groups that give us access to content and long-term strategy that others don't as well, which plays a key role in a lot of this stuff. And importantly, the type of inventory we're delivering on, again, this comes right back to what we were talking about at the beginning is, what are you getting? And what you're getting is 100% non-skippable, only full episode. What you're getting was 100% viewable. Our benchmark right now is about 98.12% completion rate. The reason it's so high has everything to do with those 2 points. It's largely connected TV experience. It's largely full episode premium content. You take those things and put them together, you have people watching to completion. Your ads are being viewed in a living room. It's a living room experience. It's that kind of product. Now, when we talk about how it works, we've talked about kind of these first 3 things a little bit already, where we access premium networks, premium platforms, and the Hearst family of inventory. What we haven't talked about a lot, a little bit, but I want to touch on here, is how we target that information. So one of the ways that we built this product that is a little bit different from the rest of the industry is we started with data first. So there's a few different ways you can build products like this. The easiest one is to say, I'm just going to go partner with a bunch of demand-side platforms, get as much inventory as I can, and then resell it. And a lot of companies have taken that approach. What we did was we sat back and said, let's start with the data management side first. So we began to build a data management platform in partnership with DataZoo, where we take Hearst inventory and Hearst insights first, understand those audiences, and then build out from there. Because one of the things that we know that we are very known for, and the reason you purchase from us, is we have quality audiences at scale. We're trying to achieve the same thing here, right? So what we kind of began to move out with was from what we own, what we work with. And then we began to spread out to other data sources. Now, the way that a product like this actually functions is interesting. It's also terrifying. So you take IP addresses, you match them with household, you use household data from Axiom and Experian, and you kind of understand the economic model of the house, the purchasing behavior of the house, and the census data of the house. Excuse me. So then you take the IP address, match it to a Wi-Fi address, use that Wi-Fi to match it to devices, and use those unique device logins to get to the individual. This should terrify all of you right now. So the idea here is that we have the ability to target at a household level with great granularity and understand what people are watching on various devices at different times in the household. We also have really accurate audience data as a result, because what we're able to understand is not only who lives where and what they're streaming, but also because we own, again, back to the Rokus and the A&Es of the world, we have, thanks, Jim. We have a unique opportunity from that side to understand the actual registration information of how they're logging in and who they are. This presents some interesting challenges, though, as one I alluded to at the beginning, which I think is just a fascinating case study, where, back to, okay, my daughter's logging in on her Apple TV, so it's a connected device, to watch A&E content. But to get to the new show on A&E, she has to use her cable subscription to get into it, but she doesn't have cable, so she uses her mom's login. So who am I targeting at that point, right? That's a unique challenge to overcome. And the way that we've begun to work on that is by looking a layer deeper than just login information. So we're able to take things like understanding which IP addresses and which physical locations that content's being consumed. So one of the easier ways to do it is mom lives here, daughter lives here. We can make certain distinctions in content consumption by location and begin to understand crossover UID information to target appropriately. That's easy. The harder, it's not really easy, but that's kind of easy. The harder part is what happens when mom's in the living room and daughter's in the bedroom, because now you're in the same IP, same Wi-Fi, same household. This is where it gets really interesting, because then we start to use unique identification information based on who's logging in and how. We use devices that are connected to those logins, and we even use frequency of connection of device to a Wi-Fi. So we understand who's home at what times, that kind of thing. And we can track that back at times to consumer data and to browsing and web history data to understand the demographic profile of an individual. So while it doesn't get perfect, what we do get is we say, well, we know this person streams using these logins on an iPhone, on their connected TV, and during their day, this is their web history profile. During the day, this is this other person's web history profile. Here's when they're home, here's when they're not. And we can make more educated decisions that way. So I tell you all this stuff, so that boils down to about 650 data points per person, by the way, which again, be afraid, be very afraid. But the good news on all that, am I telling you right now, take a product like this and go target, the woman with 2 freckles on her right cheek who drives a minivan, has a 1-legged dog and 3.5 kids? No, do not do that. It's like any marketing approach. The reality is marketing, especially premium television marketing, is a great branding mechanism, right? You have someone's captive attention, it's emotive, it's communicative, it's a great advertising medium. What we are able to do with this product is simply eliminate some of the waste. We're putting you on primetime TV at a very good price and doing it in a way where we can target the audience you're after more efficiently. That's the headline. This is why this product is either the easiest or the worst sale of your life, because what I just said should be enough. It's premium television, slightly different audience, but better targeting, done, right? The hard part is, well, what happens when my daughter's streaming on my Apple TV, right? So this is where you get into those discussions. And I want you guys to hopefully be prepared to answer some of that on our behalf, but also understand that we've thought about it. That's the hard part about this product. It's a lot easier to go buy inventory and just resell inventory. It's a lot harder to build from the ground up and understand how you're trying to get that inventory in front of somebody. And how we optimize that is because we've built a lot of scale. And when I say a lot of scale, on a monthly basis across just our station footprint, I have about 1 billion commercials available for sale through this product. When you drill down into DMA in a market like this, Jerry, what's the number here? 15? So just on connected TVs, we have about 15 million commercials available for sale every month. You go over to Omaha, it's about, I think, 20. You go down to Kansas City, we're in 33. You go to a city like Boston, where I sit, you're close to 100. So, we have massive scale, and we've really taken our time cultivating it and making sure we can give it to you. That's why we guarantee our buys. What that also allows us to do is solve for some of the things I talked about earlier about frequency. So when you're watching a program, we have basically a standard where we don't serve the same ad to the same viewer within the same programming more than twice. It's usually a two time. But that's just the default. If you want it to be annoying, you can. If you don't want to be annoying and you want to stretch it out even further, you can. And there's other exciting opportunities like message sequencing because of the volume of our inventory. So if you wanted to say, we know that we served brand message A to this consumer as they were watching the KCCI streaming news and weather this morning, then we know that we served, when they checked in on the evening news, brand message B. When they sat down in the living room to watch primetime TV that night, we're going to serve them call to action message A. So we do have the ability to pace campaigns in a unique way because of this as well. Again, these are tactics that when you're testing out these products, you don't necessarily need to get too deep in the weeds. My recommendation is keep it high level, age, demo, DMA type of targeting, and let the system optimize and show you what it can do from a performance perspective. When I am talking about performance, we're typically talking about video completion rate. but we can also discuss other KPIs that matter to you and how to integrate those. One of the beautiful things about the stage we're at with this product is that we know it works, but it's still new, and it's still being it's going to evolve every week from here out. So I'm looking for advertisers who want to come in and help as well, and help me understand what matters most to you, because we're building out things like reporting dashboards and trying to build out what really matters in terms of how we execute. So as we focus in on those criteria, your feedback's very, very critical to that. We also have a really flexible API, so we do have the ability to tap in and provide data to you in real time. The only catch with that is right now is it's pretty high level data. I mean, you're going to get your commercials delivered by day, and we actually serve program level. I'll show you right now on what we focus on reporting here. It's primarily delivery, video completion rate, content type, and device. That's kind of where we focus our reporting for the most part. There's a couple of reasons for this. I mean, first off, again, it's a TV product, so we want to make sure you know that you got what you bought. We want to make sure your video completion rate's solid, and you got the audience you wanted at scale. And then we show you where you delivered. There's asterisks with that, right? So where you delivered stops at the channel and app level, so we don't get down to programming. And that's just a fact of the space. No one gets down to programming level targeting or transparency right now on reporting. We're solving for that. I mean, that'll be something that's fixed, I think, over the next year, but right now it's just a limitation of the space. One thing I think we do better than most, however, though, is give you reporting like this where you can actually see where you delivered. So one thing I want to point out, though, that I think is kind of fascinating. When you get your reporting, you'll see things like you see on the screen here where there's A&E number 1 and then Roku's number 3. What about the people who watch A&E on Roku? So that's a natural question, right? We do have the ability, Roku's kind of unique, so because we work with them in a unique relationship, we have the ability to pair into that and understand where you served on Roku. But our standard reporting is going to show up like this. The important thing to recognize is it's not a duplicated audience. So the streaming you see in A with A&E is the unique A&E audience we delivered. The A&E audience in the Roku platform is distinct from that. It's not the same people. They're different viewers. So because of that, you're not getting counted twice in any of those metric buckets. So it's important to know that we're making sure we separate that out. The other thing you may notice on here is you're going to see names like Pluto TV. And when you go back to an advertiser oftentimes with names like that, they go, where did you serve my ad? That's not good. And then you realize, do a little homework, they have 6 million subscribers, they're a top 5 Roku app, and they stream cable news TV and movies, and they're a high quality content source. This is going to become way more common. Be ready for this type of thing. You're going to see Tubi TV, you're going to see Pluto TV, you're going to see Fubo TV. You stream, I can tell, because you're going, yeah, I watch all that. Right. Yeah.
I've seen the reports where I had all those things.
Right.
It's Tubi TV.
Right. And sometimes you see things that sound pretty cheesy too. So like we've had reporting come back where I've had to be like, what do we do? Because it'll be like, I watch free movies, and I'm like, that doesn't sound right. And then you realize they took $300 million in investment last year, bought a bunch of MGM movies, and so it's, there is some interesting elements of your reporting, interesting elements of your delivery that you're gonna have to just familiarize yourself with, because it is good stuff. Like, we're not giving you crap. It's just stuff you're not all that familiar with until you peel back a layer or two. So you'll see in the appendix to this deck, which I think you'll probably all get after this call, wow, I'm used to being on the phone, after this meeting, you'll see our inventory sources laid out with definitions next to them. So you get a better handle on where we serve and how we serve. There's also some unique opportunities within the inventory we serve that are very non-traditional. For example, we have access to television inventory in pediatric waiting rooms and in salon waiting rooms and in very focused audiences that are actual physical locations. The only catch with that type of thing is you're not going to be measured the same way on delivery because we don't know the audience, in its entirety. So the impression volume on that is something that you have to just take for what it is. That'll change too in really, again, more creepy ways where we're identifying, sounds on your phone and can match that back to commercials. And once they do the brain-machine interface and you're just watching TV in your face, but I don't know how to advertise on that stuff yet. But we'll get there, I'm sure, within the next, my lifetime. I hope not. But we also do some breakdowns by device type as well. So you'll be able to see, where you showed up in terms of platform. There's, again, everything's imperfect. You'll see things like Apple TV, Roku, Amazon. You'll see where. The caveat there is you also see things like generic TV, because there's a lot of different streaming platforms that people can plug into, and sometimes they're not all easily accessible through the data. We make sure the content is, we make sure we're really transparent about that. Sometimes the platforms get a little wonky, but for the most part, we focus in on Roku and focus in on the more name brand platforms. The one exception to that rule, generally speaking, across our space is Hulu. And the reason for that is Hulu treats their business very similar to the networks treat their business, like the ABCs, NBCs, CBSs of the world, where they do upfronts. So they have a walled off content center. They, at the beginning of the year, go and pitch that to agencies, and they're usually sold out by about April. Natural growth and some of their reserve inventory is held off for RFPs as the year goes on. But Roku's great, Hulu's great content, it's a great environment. It's just not an environment that's generally accessible in any kind of open ecosystem. We've talked to them a little bit about accessing their content. The interesting thing is Pluto TV is a rebroadcaster of Hulu content, so we do access some of the content itself. It's just not Hulu for the most part. What I've seen as a best practice for agencies for the most part has been they make two buys. They usually buy distinctly on a national footprint from like a platform like a Hulu or Roku, and then they supplement with a product like ours because we have the scale to do it at the local level. Even Hulu, which is the reason they sell the way they do, and I don't think it's a bad business model, but the reason they do it is because once you start to drill down into DMA and local demo, you get to a place where you just can't scale campaigns very well. So you end up in a circumstance where you have to sell more national footprint stuff. Even when you have 17, 18 million subscribers, just because, I was in Omaha yesterday and they have 80,000 Hulu subscribers, right? So all of a sudden the number comes down, and then when you say, I only want women between this age demo, all of a sudden numbers come really down, and you need to figure out a way, how do I pace that out? How do I supplement that inventory? So it's an interesting space. I mean, it's one that's evolving constantly. It's one that we are heavily invested in for the reasons I mentioned. We see it as very much this being a component part of the future of who we are as a television company. So we're not planning on this for the short term, which is another reason why I'm very honest with you guys about what I see in the space too, about things that are being sold a little bit as snake oil sometimes, because every time somebody lies when they sell this product, they hurt me too, because then I have to go in and either correct something or they think I'm lying. So, there's a lot of stuff that, I'm hoping I can maybe help you with as well, while I'm here. So I'll hit pause there, and, if you have any questions on what I just showed you or any questions about what you've been up to, I'd be happy to answer them. Yeah.
In order to see some of those cable networks that even Hearst owns,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I have to be a cable subscriber
No.
to see them?
So that's a great question, because this is a distinct product from cable, very distinct. So I'll give you a good example of that too. So over-the-top television, the definition is that we don't require a set-top box, a cable subscription, or a satellite subscription. So the fact of the product is that you don't need a cable subscription.
How would I access it? I'm cord cutter.
Yeah. So
How would I watch HGTV? Would I watch it on Sling?
Probably.
Okay.
So the majority
I
of
can't watch it through the HGTV app because I don't have a.
So here's the interesting caveats to some of that. So this is why the space is,
Detail.
yeah. So the majority of OTT content we're talking about here is what you just described. I'm logging in through an app of some kind. So it's Sling, it's Roku, maybe your smart TV has access to downloading it. There's a lot of different things that you can access that are true OTT app-based streaming. The caveat to that is you can also log into the web, right? And you can go to hgtv.com and stream episodes. You'll get a lot of that content ungated. But when you get to the new content, they're going to say, type in your cable subscription, right? There's a few different ways that works now. So sometimes it's type in your Roku subscription or your Hulu subscription. There's a bunch of different ways you can access that. But when they ask you for your cable subscription, what they're trying to do is just prove that you paid for the content in some way. They don't want to give it away, right? If it's happening on hgtv.com, if it's on their website, we still include that inventory in this product. So if it's on the direct-to-consumer channel or the actual app or network-owned channel, we have that inventory. If they log into Xfinity.com or log into Spectrum.com and stream through the Spectrum apps, that's cable. So that's kind of where you would draw the line. If you're on the Spectrum or kind of Xfinity platform doing something, it's part of a cable buy. If you're not, and this is why we can access some cable cable inventory, even though it's not true cable inventory, through this product by people who go direct to the content owner.
So you don't have access to that if it's Xfinity or Spectrum?
Correct. Yeah, what you see, so this is actually another distinction I think is really important for you guys to understand. When you're meeting with a cable company and they define OTT television as someone watching one of their programs on a laptop, they're lying or they don't know what they're talking about. Because the reason that you're logging into Xfinity.com, and logging in is kind of the key word there, is because you're paying a cable bill. That is by definition what having the cord attached is all about. Just because you're streaming it on a device that's not necessarily connected to a cable wire, it's still a cable buy because it's still inventory that they are controlling in that manner. It's the interesting distinction. The reason that there's a gray area here is because the content owners themselves also have rights to the content. So they're getting audience information from you. They're making sure you're paying for new content by having you log into their sites, which is valuable to them, but they still own that content. So if it's being streamed directly through them, that feed is not advertising paid for by the cable companies. It's advertising being paid for directly to them. We pay them for that. So that's why it's valuable for them to be able to let you access that stuff at scale because they're a more direct channel to get it. But again, this is also a component of the product where it's a little convoluted. Because when you look at the ecosystem here, think back 10 years when ad networks and programmatic buying started to pick up steam. There were 100 ad networks. There's 2 or 3 that matter today. This will be similar to that. We're gonna streamline the pipes, the processes. You're gonna see over the next decade, or probably sooner than that with the way that these products work now, there's gonna be attrition, there's gonna be consolidation, and you're gonna end up with 2 or 3 ad networks that matter. But I think what you're really gonna see is content companies take way more control of what they have. Because when you don't need the actual piping, when you don't need the actual wire from house to house and everything to deliver your content, you have the opportunity to go through other channels to get there. Then the question becomes, Wi-Fi, how are you getting your Wi-Fi? How does that play into it? And that's been really interesting for me as someone, in this space who's directly tied to a lot of other companies acting in this space. Because, for example, I work with my peers at other broadcast groups and leaders from, I'm with Freewheel on a regular basis. They're a Comcast company. I was with Altice last week. You meet with all these guys who are doing it different ways. The reason we're having these meetings is because I've never been in meetings in this space before where the opening line is pretty consistent, where it's, let's lay down our arms. We're typically competitors, but we got to figure out how to work together better. And the reason that it opens that way is because we're using technology layers that are pretty consistent to get our products out there. So we need to figure out how do we create an ecosystem where we can do that and compete as a big group with Facebook, with Google, with the major tech players. We're still going to own our content. We're still going to have a lot of ability to just control what we have, but the tech layers are consistent. Freewheel serves about 98% of OTT through their server. You have to work with them. It's just a technology cost of doing business. But it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to buy directly from Comcast. It means that they want to be serving our stuff too. So it's the Google thing, right, where DFP becomes a standard. So, we're in the early stages of that. So things are going to flesh out and change. But the good news is, we're going into it with eyes wide open this time. Whereas we went into the display programmatic side and got beat up because it was like, yeah, let's let the market choose audience. And then you guys said, well, we don't care about content anymore then. We just want audience. And then your ads run on Al Jazeera training videos on YouTube, and you say, wait, content might matter a little bit. So that's what tends to happen over time, and we're seeing a bounce back now, where our content is becoming much more valuable because we are controlling it, we're controlling the audience experience, and you can trust that when you make a buy from KCCI, that you're going to deliver the way you were promised. It's that kind of thing.